Hello and welcome. My name is Peter Gurney and I'm delighted to be presenting this series of webinars on Voice of the Customer. I'm the Senior Director for VoC Solutions at NetReflector, which is a full-service customer insights firm specializing in enterprise feedback systems and Voice of the Customer programs. We call this series Practical VoC. In each session we'll be sharing simple nuts and bolts information based on the experiences of real companies. Our intention is that after completing the series, you'll have the foundational knowledge for starting a VoC program in your organization, or for improving your existing program if you already have one in place. In this first session, we'll cover basic information about VoC. What is it? What is it used for? How do you get it? And what do you need to know to get started? The second session, called VoC Applications, will dig into the specific ways that Voice of the Customer is used to improve organizational performance and increase customer loyalty and profitability. And in the final session, VoC Programs, we'll look at how you can get VoC up and running in your own organization, what resources you'll need, how to get buy-in from stakeholders, and how to get stakeholders to take effective action on the results. So let's get started with the first session, VoC Basics. We'll begin with a few definitions. First, what do we mean by VoC? We define Voice of the Customer as anything that customers say to your organization or about your organization. It doesn't matter how or where they choose to say it, whether it's responding to a survey, calling you on the phone, sending an email, or rating your service online. It's all Voice of the Customer. If we agree that listening to what customers have to say is an essential business practice, then our challenge is to find this information, interpret it appropriately, and apply it in a way that benefits both our organization and our customers. VoC covers a lot of territory, but it's helpful to think of it as falling into three main categories. First, there are the cases in which we reach out to customers through surveys, focus groups, customer panels, and other traditional market research methods. Second, there are the cases in which customers reach out to us. They do this by calling, emailing, filling in comment cards, or sending letters. Typically, this information is managed by the customer service or operations part of the business. The third category is when customers reach out to other customers or to potential customers. This is a fast-growing area, and it includes community forums, social media, rating sites, and blogs. It also includes old-fashioned word-of-mouth, where customers talk about their experiences face-to-face with friends and family. So VoC includes a lot of data from a wide variety of different sources. An effective VoC program can gather an incredible amount of very rich information, which can sometimes seem overwhelming. However, if you funnel that information so that it serves very targeted needs for specific stakeholders, it starts to make sense and it becomes easier to get a handle on the process. There are multiple ways that VoC can be used, but we'll just touch on 6 of the most common areas. First, most organizations choose a few key metrics and monitor them as a way to keep a pulse on the health of the customer relationship. These metrics could include average customer satisfaction, net promoter scores, first call resolution, customer sentiment, or any number of other high-level indicators. Second, VoC is used to identify specific customers with unresolved complaints or issues. Typically, there's an alert system in place to make sure that someone contacts these customers and attempts to solve the problem. Third, VoC is used to reward and recognize employees. The results are often tied directly to bonuses or other compensation, but the data can also be used to identify high-performing employees or teams for special recognition. Next, VoC is used as an integral part of any continuous improvement methodology, whether it's Lean, Six Sigma, TQM, or some other approach. It's used to identify opportunities for improving processes, policies, and products, for gathering critical customer requirements, for testing the potential impact of changes, and for monitoring customer feedback after changes have been implemented. Fifth, VoC is increasingly being integrated into training and internal communication content for employees. Hearing how customers talk about their experiences and what their concerns are is an effective way to build a customer service culture. Finally, VoC is used to develop a deeper understanding of what customers want, how they think, and how we can persuade them to do more business with us. We can look deep into the data to discover emerging issues, reveal how customers view our brand, and compare how customers view us versus our competition. Looking ahead, we'll be covering this subject in more detail with examples from real companies in the second session, VoC Applications. So what does a VoC program do within an organization? We'll be looking at that question in detail in the third session, but for now we should recognize 4 primary functions of a VoC program. First, gathering feedback from multiple VoC sources. Second, analyzing the information to identify relevant customer issues, needs, preferences, and trends. Third, communicating findings to internal stakeholders using a variety of different reports. And fourth, advising stakeholders on how best to use the information to achieve their business goals. This last point is very important because if VoC isn't effective at driving business success, the program will go away pretty quickly. So that's the high-level picture. Let's move on to some specific sources of VoC data and methods for looking at the information. I said before that there are 3 categories of VoC. The first is where we reach out to customers. The most common way to do this is through surveys. Just about every company does some type of customer satisfaction survey nowadays. They've become so inexpensive and easy to distribute, they've emerged as the default method for asking customers for feedback. There are other useful methods as well, including focus groups and depth interviews. Both of these can provide ideas and insights that can subsequently be tested through surveys or other means. And increasingly, organizations are recruiting customer panels and advisory groups that will give ongoing feedback or respond to specific questions. But for most companies, some sort of survey is at the core of their VoC program. It's important to differentiate between 2 key types of VoC surveys because they have very different uses and companies sometimes get them mixed up. The first is what we'll call relationship surveys. These are generally sent out once or twice a year and they tend to be fairly in-depth. Relationship surveys typically don't ask about a specific interaction. They're intended to measure attitudes and perceptions about your organization, how satisfied your customers are overall, how likely they are to do business with you again or refer you to others, what the factors are that contribute or detract from satisfaction, etc. You would typically collect a pretty large sample for this type of survey so you can do statistical analysis, segmentation, and other slicing and dicing of the data. Relationship surveys are primarily strategic in nature. They help you learn how you can serve customer needs more effectively, create a more engaging customer experience, and differentiate your organization from the competition. A second type of VoC survey looks at specific transactions. Customers are contacted by phone or email soon after making a call or visiting a store or website, and they're asked for their feedback about that particular experience while it's still fresh in their minds. They might also be asked a question or 2 about their overall relationship with the company, but by and large the survey is used to evaluate specific interactions. The data can be used for coaching employees, for monitoring service quality, and for service recovery. But it should generally not be used to infer overall customer satisfaction levels. It's really a tactical tool more than a strategic one. Our view is that just about every organization should be conducting relationship surveys. Transactional surveys should be used as well if you have a lot of customers and a large volume of transactions. But if you don't have many customers that get a lot of calls or emails, transactional surveys might not be a great investment. The second VoC category I mentioned is when customers take the initiative to reach out to us with questions, complaints, or some issue that's important to them. These contacts can be by phone, email, chat, letter, comment card, or any number of other channels that we make available to our customer base. Most of the feedback we get when customers reach out to us is in the form of words, either text or voice. This type of information is more difficult to analyze than survey data. Nowadays there's a lot of talk about using voice or text analytics programs, which look for keywords and phrases, identify linguistic patterns, assign sentiment values, and do other sophisticated analysis of customer comments. These can definitely be useful tools if you have a very large volume of comments coming in on a regular basis. However, it takes significant startup costs and internal resources to use these programs effectively. If you aren't a large company with a lot of resources, don't worry. There are plenty of other methods that will give you good information about voice and text data. One of them I've already mentioned, but in a different context. That's transactional surveys. I said that companies typically use these surveys to get feedback about how well a specific transaction went, but you can also use them to dig into why the customer contacted you in the first place and what they want you to know about their experience. It just depends on how you write the survey and what you're trying to discover. Another fairly easy and inexpensive way to analyze what customers are saying is by asking frontline employees, the people who talk to customers day in and day out. Employees have been shown to be accurate at identifying customer issues, emerging trends, and other useful VoC information based on the customer comments they're hearing all day long. You can survey employees to get at this information or conduct focus groups or panels just like with customers. Most companies with contact centers will already have a system in place for employees to categorize or log customer issues after each contact, and this can certainly be a useful analytical tool. However, anyone who's worked with call centers knows that the agents are pretty inconsistent about logging calls, particularly during peak periods. They're concerned about keeping their average handle times low, and often they can't take the time to do a good job logging notes and assigning categories. So you should use this information if you have it, but you'll definitely need to use other methods as well. I'll quickly mention two more methods. The first is call monitoring. This is used for coaching call agents, but again, it can be repurposed to analyze customer issues. Finally, you can set up small teams of contact agents who are specially trained to categorize customer issues and record details about the contacts. Unlike other contact agents, these test teams log every call and email they take, so the information will actually be more accurate even though the sample of contacts may not be very large. And I mentioned before voice and text analytics. If you look at the first two VoC categories, you'll notice that there are some key differences in how customers talk to us. When we reach out to customers, we get to decide who we talk to, what we want them to talk about, and when we want to talk to them. When customers reach out to us, they select themselves, they get to talk about what's important to them at the moment, and they do it on their schedule, not ours. It's obvious that both categories can provide useful information, but neither one can tell the whole story. We need to be gathering data from both sides if we really want to get a balanced view of what customers have to say. In the third category, customers reaching out to other customers, we have very little control about what goes on. They can talk about our organization to anyone they want, whenever they want, and we just have to do our best to listen and learn. One of the ways that customers talk about us is through rating and review sites, which may be on our company website or on a consumer feedback site like Yelp or TripAdvisor or Angie's List. The ratings are useful in themselves, of course, but more interesting are the comments that explain why customers rate us the way they do. We may also be mentioned in blogs, as well as community forums that are hosted on our website. One thing to remember about community forums is that although they can contain very useful information, they can also function as echo chambers where a small number of customers talk among themselves and don't represent the larger customer population. So you have to be careful how you interpret these conversations. The most obvious method for customers to reach out to each other is through various social media sites like Facebook and Twitter. In some cases, these are hosted by your company, which gives you some level of control, but most of the social media buzz is going to be on private pages that you have little ability to influence. Finally, there's traditional word of mouth, which consists of private conversations, stories, and hopefully referrals that will bring in more business to your organization. So how do you get this type of information? Well, you can start by subscribing to free internet feeds and alert services like Google Alerts. These will look for key words such as your company's name or key phrases such as a new product slogan and alert you when they pop up on an internet site. You can also pay for a service like NetReflector to monitor key influencer sites and analyze the findings for you. This is a good way to go because it puts a buffer between you and the day-to-day comments, so you won't be tempted to overreact to random bits of commentary, and you'll be able to take action on the things that make a difference. Many text analytics programs have features that allow you to tap into specific sites and gather comments for analysis. Again, this can be costly and require a lot of internal expertise, but if your organization generates a significant amount of buzz on the internet, it can be worth the investment. Just a few points to keep in mind when you collect VoC from the internet. First, there can be a lot more smoke than fire. Don't assume that the volume or sentiment of comments are always going to predict how customers will act. Many companies are finding that the predictive value of internet comments can sometimes be pretty minimal. For example, television producers have fooled themselves into thinking they have a hit show on their hands when what they actually have is a small cult following that's making a lot of noise. Second, along the same lines, I mentioned echo chambers a minute ago. Check to see if it's the same people doing all the talking or if new people have entered the conversation. And the bottom line is take a deep breath before you react to something you hear on the internet. Lots of companies are spending their time playing whack-a-mole reacting to everything they hear. Unless you see a clear trend or surge in comments, take a little time to test and validate what you find before assuming that it's important. We're going to take a few minutes now to talk about how you can get started using Voice of the Customer. In the VoC program session, we'll go into this topic in greater detail. There are 3 steps we always recommend for getting started with VoC. The first is to decide from the beginning how you want to apply the information in your organization. This may sound obvious, but to be frank, it's not very often done. What we do see is that a lot of companies buy into a system or technology and then try to figure out what to do with the information. Our advice is that you first think through the best uses of customer feedback in the context of your organization's strategic goals, and then build the VoC program around that. Look at the 6 categories of usage that we discussed earlier and go through each one to see if it fits your objectives. Then start designing the type of VoC program features that will allow you to collect, analyze, report, and apply the data to each of the relevant objectives. Second, do an inventory of your current VoC sources and uses. You're probably already gathering a lot of VoC data now, but it may be that the systems you have in place need tweaking in order to fit your broader needs. For example, you may be logging and monitoring customer calls, but using that data primarily for coaching call agents. That's fine, but with a few changes, you could also be doing root cause analysis, supporting process improvement efforts, and gathering verbatim feedback for training and internal communications. We recommend that you put together a spreadsheet that identifies every source of voice of the customer in your business, how the data are collected, what form the data are in, who uses it, and how they use it. Then compare that information to your program objectives and see what you need to change versus what you need to buy to build your program. And third, go out and talk to stakeholders and get their point of view. I'm not just referring to executives and senior managers. Talk to customers and find out if your company is making it easy for them to talk to you. You may be surprised to find that they want to communicate, but it's too frustrating, or they think their information is going into a black hole. Talk to frontline employees and find out what customers are saying to them. Let them help design the VoC program. And talk to the mid-level managers who may be held accountable for the VoC results. Find out what information they will need in order to help them succeed. Finally, a few words of advice. The first is to start simple. Get a few key components in place and build from there. We can help you with that. NetReflector offers bundled VoC systems that allow you to get started easily and add new capabilities as the program matures. Next, don't let the tail wag the dog. I've made this point several times, but it's worth repeating. Buy the systems that meet your VoC objectives rather than investing in the flavor of the month and then figuring out what to do with it. And you might want to run some pilots and gather some success stories before rolling out the big VoC initiative. We've all seen big rollouts that fizzle because they set unrealistic expectations. Better to have some solid wins in place and then do the rollout. Finally, expect the program to evolve. You'll probably find that as your stakeholders get used to having high-quality VoC data, they'll start asking for new types of information and reporting. You'll also probably find that your scores will flatten out after a while, and you'll need to find new ways to keep making progress. So we strongly advise that you not get too tightly locked into a specific process, but rather to allow for change and growth. The good news is that an effective VoC program can be immensely valuable to your organization, and it doesn't need to be complicated or particularly expensive. What it does need is good planning and a realistic understanding of what VoC can accomplish. It also helps to have a good research partner who can help you at each stage in the process. Which is my segue into saying a few more words about NetReflector. I mentioned before that NetReflector offers bundled VoC components that can get you started easily and that can be expanded as your program matures. We call this approach Vantage Point VoC Hubs. This is a comprehensive suite of modular feedback solutions designed to streamline VoC measurement programs. It's customizable and we can get it up and running in as little as 4 weeks. With this modular approach, you can address the full range of VoC touchpoints, including call center monitoring, customer and partner and employee satisfaction, website feedback, and social networking and other internet-based VoC. We also offer custom program design consulting, survey development, data collection and hosting, detailed reporting and analysis, and ongoing project management. Well, that wraps up our VoC Basics session. Looking ahead, the second session looks in more detail at the different ways you can apply VoC in your organization. And the final session covers the resources and activities needed to get a VoC program up and running. Thank you, and if you have any questions about this series or about NetReflector, please go to our website at netreflector.com or give us a call at 866-927-1209. And if you'd like to contact me directly, please do at pgurney, P-G-U-R-N-E-Y, at netreflector.com.